slip into my shoes. Open the window.
Are you like me and you question who actually created the Ouija board? Or even better, why was something marketed as a game tied to some of the most supernatural stories ever heard? Before the Ouija board ever existed, people were already trying to speak to the dead. Not just in a hidden way or a secretive way, like we do nowadays, but more openly, socially, almost normally. And to understand the Ouija board, you have to go back to the mid-1800s, during a time called the Spiritualism movement. And this wasn't just a belief system, but it was actually a full cultural shift. People truly believed that when someone died, they didn't just disappear. They still existed, still conscious, still aware, and more importantly, still reachable. This movement really took off around 1848, when two girls claimed that they could communicate with spirits through knocking sounds. Simple knocks. 1 for yes, 2 for no. And that was enough for them, because at that time, people were grieving on a massive scale. We had war, disease, there was loss everywhere, and religion wasn't giving them the answers that they needed. So people started looking elsewhere. And spiritualism became this blend of faith, curiosity, and early science. People weren't just hoping spirits were real, they were trying to prove it. Seances became normal or common. Families could sit in a dimly lit room holding hands and waiting for something to move, and sometimes things did. Tables would shift, objects would slide. Messages would come through slowly, imperfectly, but enough to keep people believing. And then came something that changed everything. The planchette, a small wooden device, usually heart-shaped, with wheels and a pencil attached. People would place their fingers on it and wait. At first there was nothing, and then movement. It began to write messages. It began to write sentences. And sometimes things no one in the room claimed to control. But here's the thing. It was slow, messy, and unclear. And people wanted something easier, something faster, something they could understand. And that's where the Ouija board comes in. Because the original Ouija board, it wasn't created out of nothing. It was simply created to simplify something that was already happening. The Ouija board was never originally meant to be dark. It wasn't created as something evil or even forbidden. In fact, it was created to answer a question that humanity has always asked. What happens after we die? And at its core, the purpose of the Ouija board was simple: connection. People wanted to speak to loved ones they lost, get answers about the unknown, feel some type of sense of control over something uncontrollable. But there's a deeper layer here, because the Ouija board also gave people something else: permission. Permission to interact with the unseen. Permission to cross a line that most belief systems told them not to cross. And it did it in a way that made it feel safe, structured, contained. It even gave the illusion that you were in control, that you had the rules. Yes, no, and goodbye. Like you could open something and close it whenever you wanted. But curiosity has a way of pushing boundaries. And what started as connection slowly became experimental. And what started as experimentation started to feel like something completely different. Now here's where things begin to shift, from spiritual practice to straight business. Because the Ouija board wasn't invented by one person, it was built from ideas that already existed. But in 1891, those ideas were packaged, patented, and sold. The board was patented by Elijah Bond, but the real push came from businessmen who saw something powerful. They didn't see something spiritual, but they saw something commercially. This wasn't just a tool, it was a product, and it was marketed as something light, fun, even playful. It was sold as a parlor game, something families could gather around and use for entertainment. Pause, let's think about that for a second. Something designed to communicate with spirits that passed on the other side was now sitting in people's living rooms next to other board games. Monopoly, Guess Who, Clue, Life, Sorry, right? Think about that. It's sitting next to these other board games. And it was especially marketed towards women, families, people dealing with grief, curious young adults, aka teenagers. And the message was intentional. Look, it's not dangerous. It wasn't mystical. No, it was framed as harmless curiosity, something you could try and then put away. But over time, the stories started to change. And once people started sharing their experiences, the marketing couldn't keep up with the reality. This is where things begin to take a turn. Because these aren't just stories. These are experiences that are being shared by people all over the place. And they're being shared over and over and over again. So obviously, there's not just an isolated incident. This is something that's occurring constantly with multiple people experiencing the exact same thing. Let's get into the stories now. I read a story about a girl who said she used a Ouija board with her cousin. It was nothing crazy at first, and then, they're asking the usual questions. Is anyone here? What's your name? And of course it starts responding. But then the girl said she decided to test it. Me personally, I don't know if I would test it or not, but I guess that's personal choice. So what she does is she asks something no one else in the room could possibly know. She asks, "What did my mom used to call me when I was little, when no one was around?" And the planchette stopped, completely still for a few seconds. And then it starts moving. Slowly at first. Then it gets faster, and it starts to spell letter by letter. And when it finished spelling it out, she said her cousin immediately pulled her hands off the board because it spelled a nickname that only her mom used. Not her friends, not her family, just her mom. And her mom had passed away. But what messed her up the most was what happened after. She said for the next few nights, she would hear the nickname being whispered right before she fell asleep, like somebody was standing next to her on the bed, calling her the same way her mom used to. Here was another story that I had came across. So here it goes. When a group of friends were using the Ouija board late at night, and they say everything felt normal at first. Anytime I'm reading these stories, I always hear, it felt normal at first. There was nothing happening, whatever, right? Until it wasn't. So let's get back into this. They said it felt normal at first, until one of them thought of a question in their head, but didn't say it out loud. They didn't speak, didn't move, didn't react. They just thought the question, and the planchette moved. Before anyone could say anything, it started to spell out an answer, and they all just froze because no one had asked anything. So one of them finally said, "Wait, what question are you even answering?" And the girl who had the thought started crying because the answer on the board matched exactly what she thought in her head, word for word. And from that point forward, they stopped speaking their questions out loud and they just thought them. And the board kept answering until one of the answers said, "I hear all of you." And that's when they ended it immediately. But one of them said something that stuck with me. She said, "It didn't feel like we were talking to something. It felt like something was listening to us before we even spoke." Now, if that doesn't give you goosebumps, I don't know what does. But even a deeper question would come in. Does that mean that spirits can read your thoughts even though maybe they can't hear your words? Here's another story that I'd like to call The Knocking Didn't Stop. And this one actually ties back into how all of this started with the knocking. There was a guy who said he used a Ouija board one night by himself, which already, that's a no for me. But during said session, he asked the spirit if it could make a noise. And right after that, he asked, can it make a noise? He heard a knock on his wall. Just one, and clear as day. So he asked again, can you do it again? And it knocked again. The same spot, same sound. So now he's thinking, okay, this is real. And he starts to ask more questions. And every time the answer was yes, there would be a knock. And no, there would be silence. But then he said something shifted because he stopped asking the questions. And he put the board away, turned off the lights, and got into bed. And then he heard it again. Knock on the wall. He didn't even ask anything. He didn't move, but it knocked again. And again. Until he finally said out loud, stop! And it stopped. But the next night it came back. And he said it didn't even matter where he was in the house, that the knocking followed him on the wall, on the door, on the ceiling, until he finally left that house completely. And he said even after moving, he still heard those random knocks late at night. For our next story, let's title this one, It Told Them How Someone Would Die. This is probably one of the darkest ones that I came across, and later I'm going to share one of my own stories with it. So, a group of friends were using the Ouija board, and it started asking about the future, which you're already pushing it at that point, right? And one of them jokingly asked, how am I going to die? And the board answered. It spelled out something specific, something detailed. This wasn't vague. It wasn't not general. When I say specific, I mean very specific. And of course, these people laughed it off. They didn't take it seriously, and they ended the session with a goodbye. But one of the girls said it couldn't shake off what it said because it didn't feel like a joke. But fast forward a few months later, the person who asked that question, they died. And the way it happened matched exactly what the board had spelled out, down to the very detail. And the girl who shared the story, they never touched a board again after that because it wasn't guessing. It already knew the future. Our next story, let's title this one, It Pretended to Be Somebody That They Loved. This one is one that honestly feels the most manipulative. Okay, so take a listen to this. There was a girl who said she used a Ouija board trying to contact her grandmother who had passed away. And the board responded immediately, using her grandmother's name and answering questions correctly, saying things only her grandmother would know. And she said at first it brought her comfort. It felt real, like she was reconnecting. But then the answer started to change. The tone changed. When you're doing these Ouija things or you're connecting to things that have passed on, it's a vibration change or an energy change. So when the girl stated that the tone changed, I knew exactly what she was talking about. Because here's the thing, it started saying things that didn't sound like her grandma anymore. Things that were off. And then one night she asked a question and the board spelled it out. I am not her. And she said her whole body went cold because for weeks it had been pretending, answering like her, speaking like her, gaining her trust, and then just admitting it was never her grandmother. Now, I would like to share my own stories that I've encountered with the Ouija board. So, first and foremost, I played with the Ouija board at a sleepover, and to God, it was a bunch of girls. I think I was 10 in 4th or 5th grade, which makes you think, why were 4th and 5th graders playing with a Ouija board at this birthday party? Okay? We all gathered around the table. There were about 8 or 9 of us, 10 of us, maybe. All gathered around this table. We start asking questions. It begins to move forward, backwards, starts spelling things. All of a sudden, it gets angry. And I'm sitting there. Now, mind you, my grandmother, Helene Sandra Bruno, Sandy, she always told me you don't ever touch that. You never touch a Ouija board. You never bring a Ouija board in this house. You don't do that. So here I am breaking one of her cardinal rules, but I'm thinking it's at somebody else's house, so it's not a big problem. The next thing I know, it starts answering questions more aggressively. Now, again, I don't remember the questions that we were asking. It probably was something stupid like, does such and so like me? Who are you? What do you want us to know? Things like that, right? Yeah, the next thing I know, all of a sudden, all of the lights in the house go out. The lights flicker once and then boom. The lights shut off out of nowhere. And we're all just sitting there. Now, of course, we're 9 and 10-year-old girls, so we're screaming. I'm not screaming. But everybody else is screaming, and I'm just sitting there. So the parents have to go trip the light. They don't trip the light. Again, we sit down to do the Ouija board one more time, and the lights go out again. And we asked the board, okay, did you do that? The answer was yes. Trip the light. Okay, so now that you know I've had my own experience, I'm also going to explain what happened at my grandma's house when one of my cousins and his friend decided to make a Ouija board. Okay, so again, the thing about the Ouija board is it's showing people how to access the spiritual realm. The problem is when you're accessing it, you don't know who you're accessing, or you don't know who you're talking to at first. It's not like you're phoning a friend and you're phoning, hey, I'm phoning Grandma Sandy. Oh, you can't answer, so now I get Billy Bob from Walk and Don't Walk. No, you don't know who's coming forward and who's not. So we move, okay? We move to this beautiful house in Discovery Bay. It's a brand new house. We're right on the lake. It's stunning, okay? My cousin moves in. My grandma tells them, my cousin and his friend, no Ouija boards. Next thing I know, my cousin comes down the stairs and he has a paper Ouija board that him and his friend created. It was made out of cardboard, and they had like a paper planchette, okay? The next thing I know, everything falls apart. I swear to God on my kids, okay? I swear to God on everything. We had a stack of CDs because back in the day, we didn't have downloads, right? We had CDs. All of the CDs looked like somebody slapped it. And they flew off the counter, okay? They flew off the counter. That happened. We had people being pushed down the stairs, even though nobody was there. We heard weird sounds, and all this was going on. And the one thing my grandma said to me was, who brought a Ouija? She said, there was a little extra vulgar language. Who the whoop, okay, brought a Ouija board into my house? And I'm not gonna lie, I didn't own up to it because it wasn't me. I said, look, I follow instructions. You know it's not me. And she knew immediately it was my cousin, and she made him dispose of it. The problem was the damage had already been done. And not only that, but we were already living on ancient Native American burial grounds. So to add that on top of my cousin making and accessing this spiritual realm, it's like everything fell apart. My grandma got cancer right after that. Everything in the house started moving. It's almost like there was such a negative energy in that house that I moved out. I couldn't even stay there. So yeah, so when I say I do not touch Ouija boards, I do not access them, I do not know. There's a reason that they're no longer available at CVS. Because back in the day, you could buy a Ouija board at CVS. You could buy it at Kmart. You could buy it at, I don't know if we had Walmarts and stuff back then. But these boards were, back in the day, boards were easily accessible anytime during the early 1990s to the early 2000s. These boards were easily accessible. You could go to CVS and get a soda and a Ouija board and not think anything of it. So that's why they marketed it, and maybe their intentions were pure, but they didn't understand what was coming with it. This is where I want to give you what my perspective is, because I don't believe that the Ouija board on its own is powerful, because it's a tool. But even tools are always amplified by your intention. And they amplified that energy. And by amplifying that energy, they amplified the access to the unknown. And the Ouija board represents something deeper than just a spiritual communication. It represents curiosity without boundaries. It represents the human desire to know, even when we're not ready for the answers. This kind of goes back to when the Watchers gave humans the knowledge. You remember the book of Enoch, for those of you guys that watched it, right? This is like when the Watchers gave humans access to ancient knowledge that they weren't, or heavenly knowledge that they weren't meant to have the answers for at that time. And I kind of look at it the same as a Ouija board. And I think that's why it became what it was. Because it wasn't just the board itself, but because of how people approached it, without protection, without understanding, without even realizing that not everything that answers has your best interest at heart. The question isn't, is a Ouija board real? But the real question is, when you're utilizing tools, who are you accessing? Are they there for your highest good? Do you know how to protect yourself? There's a lot of questions that kind of go into why the Ouija board is no longer being sold today. But again, the Ouija board wasn't the issue. It was a vessel that was being delivered to people who did not know how to use it correctly. They did not know how to ask the right questions. They weren't educated on the supernatural behind it. They weren't educated on the fact that that may not be grandma talking. That may be Bob from Walk and Don't Walk. We don't know. So yeah, it's kind of an interesting topic. And let me know, have you guys used a Ouija board? And what is your perception, or what is your story on it? Because I'd love to hear. Until next time, I'll talk to you guys later. Peace.